March 8, 2014, 1:19 a.m. A routine goodnight from the cockpit of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, then silence. The vanished transponder, 239 people erased from radar, and a nightmare that stuns the world. 11 years on, families still wait, and experts chase data across continents. But new evidence, signals traced, coordinates argued, has cracked open the search yet again. If these clues are real, they could finally reveal where MH370 lies, or deepen aviation's greatest mystery. The stakes have never been higher, and what happens next could rewrite everything we thought we knew about that missing flight. At 12:41 a.m., Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 lifted off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, bound for Beijing. On board were 227 passengers and 12 crew, each settling in for a routine red-eye across Asia. The cockpit, manned by Captain Zaharieh Ahmad Shah and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, guided the Boeing 777 through a calm, uneventful climb. Air traffic control handed the flight from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace as the plane approached the South China Sea. Then, at 1:19 a.m., a final radio call. "Good night, Malaysian 370. The voice belonged to the co-pilot. It was calm, ordinary, nothing to suggest that anything was wrong. Seconds later, the aircraft's transponder stopped transmitting. The digital heartbeat that marked MH370's existence on radar screens, gone in an instant. No distress call, no warning, just silence. For the families waiting in Beijing, for controllers watching their screens, the flight simply vanished. In that moment, the world lost track of 239 people. The last human words from MH370 faded into static, leaving only questions in their wake. Radar operators working the midnight shift at Butterworth Air Base watched their screens as the minutes ticked by, with no word from MH370. Then, just past 1:21 a.m., a blip appeared where none should have been. Instead of continuing north toward Vietnam, the aircraft had swung west in a sweeping U-turn, cutting back across the Malay Peninsula. Military radar tracked the plane's ghostly echo as it crossed land and water, passing over Penang and then out over the Malacca Strait. For nearly an hour, the plane's path played out in silence. No radio calls, no transponder, only a fading return on primary radar. The last confirmed radar contact came at 2:22 a.m., northwest of Penang, with the aircraft heading toward the open Andaman Sea. As the radar signal vanished, the trail seemed to end. But in a London control room, satellite analysts at Inmarsat pored over digital logs, searching for any sign of life. At 2:25 a.m., the aircraft's satellite data unit rebooted, silently reaching out to the network. Over the next several hours, a series of faint, automated handshakes, known as pings, linked the plane to a geostationary satellite high above the Indian Ocean. These signals, measured as burst timing offset and burst frequency offset, formed a set of invisible arcs, each one marking a possible distance from the satellite at a given moment. The final handshake arrived at 8:19 a.m., long after the plane should have landed. By then, the data suggested, MH370 was somewhere along a vast curve stretching through the southern Indian Ocean, far from any land and far from where anyone had first looked. Data scientists, piecing together radar and satellite evidence, realized the flight had continued for hours, changing course and rewriting the search map with every digital clue. The search for MH370 quickly became the largest and most challenging operation in aviation history. Within days, ships and aircraft from a dozen nations scoured the South China Sea, only to realize the plane was nowhere near its intended route. As satellite data redrew the map, the focus shifted to the southern Indian Ocean, a stretch of water as remote as any on Earth. the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, backed by international partners, took charge of the official search. Their mission: to scan an underwater wilderness spanning 120,000 square kilometers, an area nearly the size of England. Fleets of vessels towed sonar sleds and deployed deep-diving submersibles, each pass revealing mountains, canyons, and fields of volcanic rock thousands of meters below the surface. The seabed's jagged terrain confounded even the most advanced sensors, hiding any trace of wreckage beneath layers of silt and shadow. Despite years of effort and over $150 million spent, the main wreckage remained elusive. For every new sweep, hope rose and then faded, leaving only a growing sense of frustration at the scale of the mystery. On July 29, 2015, a piece of aircraft wreckage washed up on the rocky shoreline of Reunion Island, over 4,000 kilometers from the official search zone. The object, a battered wing flaperon, bore the internal code 657BB, a match to the missing Boeing 777. Forensic analysis by French investigators confirmed what many had feared. This fragment belonged to MH370. The discovery was the first physical proof that the aircraft had ended its journey in the southern Indian Ocean. But the ocean's vastness raised another question. How did a single piece travel so far from the presumed crash site? Oceanographers at CSYRO in Australia set to work, using sophisticated drift models to trace the flaperon's possible path. Their simulations, accounting for currents, wind, and wave action, showed that debris released near the search area could indeed reach Reunion within 16 months. The science of drifting objects turned a single, salt-stained wing part into a clue that narrowed the band of ocean where the wreckage might lie. Each fragment found since has been mapped and timed, their journeys shaping a search zone defined as much by water as by data. Richard Godfrey, a retired aerospace engineer, spent years combing through the digital noise of the global WSPR network, a vast web of amateur radio stations logging faint signals across continents. Godfrey claimed that on the night MH370 disappeared, the aircraft left a trail of subtle disturbances in these radio logs. Using a custom algorithm, he traced more than 300 anomalies, each one corresponding to a possible position of the missing jet. The endpoint, a set of coordinates at 29.17885 degrees south, 99.85352 degrees east, deep in the southern Indian Ocean. This spot, he argued, matched the simulated route found on Captain Zahari's home computer, a chilling parallel that reignited debate about the pilot's intentions. But the path to certainty is tangled. Professor Simon Maskell and his team at the University of Liverpool brought high-powered statistical tools to the same WSPR data, searching for patterns that could withstand scientific scrutiny. Their results, while intriguing, stopped short of full endorsement. Technical critics, including radar specialists, warned that the physics of WSPR made long-distance aircraft tracking nearly impossible, signal shifts too faint, the ocean's static too loud. For every voice convinced by the match between simulator and radio signals, another cautioned against drawing conclusions from such fragile evidence. Yet for the first time in years, the search zone had a fresh set of numbers, a possible target, precise and controversial, waiting beneath the waves. In the years after MH370 vanished, families of the missing refused to let the world forget. In hotel conference rooms and city squares, banners bearing the names of loved ones became a fixture. Voice 370, a coalition of relatives, organized vigils and marches from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, demanding answers from authorities who offered only silence or shifting explanations. Their campaign was relentless. Public petitions, legal filings, and meetings with ministers kept the pressure on. Even as months turned into years, they marked each anniversary with renewed calls for transparency and action. The discovery of debris brought no closure, only more questions and a deepening resolve. For these families, the search was never just about finding wreckage. It was about dignity, accountability, and the right to know what happened to those lost over the Indian Ocean. In the aftermath of MH370's disappearance, the world's aviation authorities faced a reckoning. The International Civil Aviation Organization moved quickly, drafting new standards that would change how every airline tracked its planes. By November 2018, commercial aircraft flying over remote or oceanic regions were required to automatically report their position at least every 15 minutes. Then, in January 2021, a new rule took effect. Any newly delivered airliner must be capable of transmitting its location every minute during an emergency. These reforms, born from loss, now shape the daily routines of pilots and controllers across the globe. Yet for the families of MH370, and for an industry that prides itself on certainty, the void left by that vanished flight remains. Even as technology closes old gaps, the unanswered questions linger, reminders of a night when a modern jet simply slipped from the sky and from the world's grasp. At 12:41 a.m. on March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 took off with 239 people on board. 11 years later, debris confirmed as part of MH370 has washed up on distant shores, and the latest signal analysis points to coordinates at 29.17885 degrees south, 99.8535 degrees east. Yet despite a 120,000 square kilometer search and international investigation, the main wreckage has not been found. Key military radar data remains partially classified, and the final minutes of the flight are still not conclusively explained. Families continue to press for answers, and their advocacy has driven real-time aircraft tracking reforms across the aviation industry. Today, MH370 stands as both a catalyst for safety improvements and a reminder of the limits of current technology. The evidence has brought us closer, but the full story of MH370 remains unresolved, leaving a question that endures above the southern Indian Ocean.